Since the start of the 12th Black Crusade launched by War Master Abaddon the Despoiler, the Gothic sector was engulfed by violent warp storms, turning it into an isolated battlefield. For a long period, the only barrier between the Chaos Invaders and the surviving Imperial worlds was the heroic Battlefleet Gothic, led by Admiral von Ravensburg. However, with the fall of 3 Blackstone fortresses, the territory held by the Imperium began to dwindle. By 147.M41, Abaddon had occupied nearly the entire Lysades subsector, ruling through brutality and enslaving planetary populations and orbital ports. He recklessly coerced local governments to resupply his invasion forces, while keeping a predatory eye on the remaining 3 Blackstone fortresses. The survival of the isolated Gothic sector government depended entirely on the uninterrupted trade and material transport between the surviving worlds. It was this merchant fleet and its trade routes that allowed the planets to assist one another, maintain production, and provide essential logistical support to Battlefleet Gothic. However, these vital lifelines were being strangled by increasingly rampant piracy. In addition to the long-standing threats of orcs and Eldar, a large number of pirate wolf packs emerged, composed of human renegades, former navy and merchant sailors who had abandoned their faith in despair. Approximately 20 such pirate groups converged in the Quinrox Sound, wielding nearly 50 modified escort-class vessels, a captured Gothic-class cruiser, and 2 salvaged Lunar-class cruisers. This paradise for outlaws threatened to bleed Battlefleet Gothic dry of maintenance and supplies before Chaos could even finish the job. Recognizing this, Admiral von Ravensburg assigned the veteran Commodore Mourndark the task of clearing the Sound. Given high authority, Mourndark organized a task force consisting of an Overlord-class battlecruiser as his flagship, a Gothic-class cruiser, 2 Dauntless-class light cruisers, and dozens of smaller frigates and destroyers. Mourndark employed a clever ruse to draw out the enemy. He dispatched a large, unladen transport convoy to act as bait along the trade routes of the Quinrox Sound. When the pirates swarmed the prey, the Imperial task force sprung from hiding and routed them. Mourndark intentionally allowed one pirate ship to escape, tracking it back to their secret base in the Barbarus Costa system. The subsequent Imperial assault was overwhelming.
Faced with the Navy's superior firepower, some pirates attempted to surrender, but they were granted no mercy and blown to dust along with their ships. When survivors fled to the surface of Barbarus III, Mourndark ended the engagement by deploying atmospheric incinerator torpedoes against the defenseless world. With the cancer of the Quinrox Sound removed, the Gothic Sector Command could finally focus on the primary war, though orc pirates remained active in the Cyclops cluster, inadvertently acting as a buffer against the spread of chaos in that region. As the war progressed, Abaddon's Fleet of Damnation began to exhibit the typical weaknesses of chaos forces, with various warbands breaking off to pursue their own selfish interests. Since the failure of the Horus Heresy, the traitor legions had fractured, and their demon primarchs, now pure warp entities, cared more for the great game of the Chaos Gods than their former legions. Abaddon maintained this unstable coalition only through the shared goal of toppling the Imperium and the promise of plunder. Realizing the enemy was now dispersed, Admiral von Ravensburg launched a decisive counterattack in 151.M41. Despite being outnumbered, he consolidated his scattered ships into a single massive hammer to crush the isolated Chaos fleets one by one, even though this forced him to weaken planetary defenses and convoy escorts elsewhere. The pivotal engagement occurred in the Gethsemane system. Following a week-long chase, Ravensburg's task force of 17 capital ships and 20 escorts cornered a Chaos fleet. Imperial Firestorm-class frigates successfully scouted the enemy main body hiding within a nebula, allowing for a full-scale assault. Cobra-class destroyers harassed the enemy flanks, forcing the Chaos ships into the teeth of the Imperial line. The traitors lost 4 battleships and 11 escorts in the brutal exchange. As the survivors attempted to flee, a massive Eldar fleet suddenly materialized in their path. Recognizing that Abaddon's possession of the Talismans of Vaul, Blackstone fortresses, threatened the entire galaxy, the Eldar joined the fray, annihilating the remaining traitors. In the aftermath, Ravensburg signed a wartime ceasefire with the Eldar, forging an alliance that allowed the Imperial Navy to use webway gates for rapid, efficient deployment.
By the end of 15.1M41, the warp storms began to recede, allowing Imperial reinforcements to finally reach the beleaguered sector and signaling the start of a massive counteroffensive to drive chaos back into the void.